The brief stretch of good injury luck that the Philadelphia 76ers seemingly had has officially evaporated as Joel Embiid finds himself back on the injury report following an injury to his face last night during the matchup with the Indiana Pacers. I'm going to break down exactly what we know at this current point, what to make of this from a Joel Embiid perspective, and if this may officially be the blow that derails the Sixers season. Now, before we dive into all that specifically, do want to start off by taking a look at the play here. Do apologize, not the clearest video that I could find, but all I could get to make work for this. But let's look at what exactly happened here. Little runner from Tyrese Halliburton. Ben Mathurin comes flying in for the rebound and just hits Joel Embiid right in the face with an elbow there. Seemingly unintentional to me, and we get a better look at it here as he comes down and just direct contact on Joel's face there. So this was shortly before halftime of last night's game, and to dive into exactly what went down in last night's game, let's first touch on the box score, which I will pull up here. A 121-107 victory by the Indiana Pacers here. A pretty lifeless performance from start to finish from the Sixers team, and you can see Joel Embiid in just his 17 minutes of action had 12 points, shot just 4 of 9 from the field, did have 5 assists, was playmaking well, but really the story was from top to bottom this team was not good enough. I thought they were really sloppy defensively. They allowed Tyrese Halliburton to get going. There was a brief stretch that I will highlight. Shout out to Ricky Council IV and Andre Drummond that I thought brought a spark off the bench. 13 rebounds from Kelly Oubre that I do want to highlight, but once again, the story is Joel Embiid getting hurt with this specific play here. Now, to dive into what we know from this, I first want to start off with my frustration from the Sixers standpoint that when this initially happened, this was right before halftime, Joel Embiid going right to the locker room, clearly getting smacked in the face here. And by the way, this is not the first time that he's broken his face. This is not the second time, not the third time. This would be time number 4 if this was a facial fracture here. Not exactly the case here, as we did get this update from Shams Charania saying that the 76ers, Joel Embiid suffered a sinus fracture in tonight's game versus Indiana. He will be further evaluated this weekend. And to dive into the specifics of what that means, with a quick Google search here, we have a sinus fracture is a break in the bone surrounding the sinuses, usually created by facial trauma or impact. Symptoms vary depending on which sinus is affected, but can include maxillary sinus, the ethmoid sinus, the frontal sinus. It continues to say, if you think you have a sinus fracture, you should see a specialist for diagnosis, which is usually done with a CT scan of the head. Sinus fractures can lead to complicated like sinus infections, difficulty breathing, and facial deformity if left untreated here. So one more look at the actual highlight here. And again, to talk a little bit about my frustrations from a Sixers perspective, that I did not appreciate the lack of acknowledgement for this specific injury here. That Joel Embiid just did not return to the floor in the second half with no announcement or no news made from this Sixers team, just leaving us to wonder as if it wasn't entirely obvious that the best player on the floor and who this is all built around was not there. Now, from the Joel Embiid perspective here, it's frustrating, man. There's no way around it. Though we've seen this guy play. That was his 6th game of the season last night. And when he has been on the floor, it has not been up to the complete par here. His average is sitting at 20.3 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, 41.1% from the field, just 16% from 3. Those are somehow climbing in the right direction after an entirely dreadful start to the season. But the story is injuries, man, and it is and always has been with Joel Embiid. Now, for stuff like this, I think I sit on the more sympathetic side of things with Joel, that like, what do you want him to do with stuff like this? It's a different story to me when the repetitive injury issues are things like not showing up in shape. Look at Zion Williamson right now, who's dealt with hamstring injuries really since he's came in the league at this point. And you take a peek at that man behind the scenes without his shirt off these days, and there's a full gut hanging out. That is not Joel Embiid. To my eyes, he looks skinnier. This is a guy who I think is trying, and his body's letting him down. And it's something like this, like if this is any other NBA player, you're brushing this off too. This is dumb luck. This is unfortunate. I don't know what you do here. And unfortunately, that is the story with Joel Embiid all too often. He's as snake bit of a professional athlete that I have ever seen here. There's repetitive, just bizarre and weird injuries. Again, he's broken his face 4 times. We're talking about a torn ligament in his thumb. Running into Markelle Fultz's shoulder, he has broken his face before. It's in the oddest of ways that it does go down, but ultimately the results are the results. And now the Sixers are at a pretty tough crossroads because of this. Now, for Joel specifically, it does not seem like it's going to be the longest term injury in the world. That my expectation, and this is just brief Googling, so who knows how legitimate it is or what the severity of Joel's specific injury is, but this is seemingly going to be somewhere in the 3 to 4 week range. But obviously, when looking at this Sixers team, they've dug themselves quite a hole already. This is something that you have to dig out of pretty soon. All I've talked about in my main message is that lately is that they just have to win games. It makes it a little bit harder when Joel Embiid is now going to be off the floor for who knows how long. And when speaking about this Sixers season as a whole, one of the things that I think I've really put to bed here is the thoughts of tanking, or the thoughts of really bottoming out this season and going for Cooper Flag or a top 6 pick. My opinion on that has not changed whatsoever. Even if this was like a season-ending injury for Joel Embiid, I just don't see any world in which you can be worse than the Wizards or worse than the Raptors or worse than the Jazz or the teams that are so directly trying to lose games right now. The fact that the Sixers draft pick is top 6 protected, which to really assure that you are going to get that pick, you pretty much got to be one of the 2 worst teams in the league, maybe 4 worst if you feel really good about your chances, but that is why the NBA does the lottery the way it does. And I think when looking realistically at this Sixers team, when you still have Paul George, when you still have Tyrese Maxey, when you still have Jared McCain, who, by the way, took quite the whack on the head himself yesterday. I can't believe that he got cleared to go back in that game and ultimately finish it. So tip the cap to Jared. Appreciate you for gutting it through, but I would have guessed that man is concussed right now. But when you have that level of talent, these type of names, that's simply going to be better than what other teams are capable of putting on the floor. That, you can muster up all the Walker Kesslers and Keontae Georges and guys that I don't mind as basketball players on the Utah Jazz. They're not going to be as good as that team there. So when thinking about how many games each are going to win, I just don't like the odds of the Sixers actually having a legitimate chance at getting a top pick there. So with that in mind, and with me feeling that way, when thinking how Daryl Morey's brain works and the calculation that he dives into, that the famous quote that he lived by during his Houston Rocket days is that you have a 5% chance or greater of winning a championship, you go all in that season. I'm not saying the Sixers have a 5% chance at winning a championship right now, but I think they have a less than 5% chance, far less than 5% chance of actually getting the first overall pick in this draft. So to me, I think we're going to find out a lot about this Sixers team once again. It did feel like they were taking strides in the right direction of the way that they were playing stylistically. Hopefully with Paul George not injured anymore, and prayers that continues, because who knows with this team at this point in time, that they can stay a little bit of afloat here. They got back-to-back games against the Hornets next, off until Monday, and then that's when that'll pick up there. They got to start winning some games. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And with that said, I do have a bit of a challenge to drop here. And who that is directed at is the man Tyrese Maxey himself here. Now, Tyrese has not been bad this year. He's averaging 24.2 points, 5 assists per game, 3.6 rebounds. The shooting efficiency starting to increase a little bit. His three-point percentage over 30% for the first time really all season. 30.3% there, still 40.8% from the field. But what we have not seen from Tyrese Maxey this season is a guy capable of taking that next step and keeping a team afloat. Tyrese Maxey is a very good basketball player, but if you're going to be this needle-moving talent, this guy that potentially we are viewing the organizational baton to be passed to you in the post-Joel Embiid era, I need to see a little something right now. I need to see a will, a fight, an ability to lead this team to at least a competitive nature on a night-by-night basis, and ultimately putting some victories in the win-loss column right now, because this team desperately needs it. So the story of Joel Embiid feels all too similar to me. It is a ultra-talented player whose body continually fails him and is getting injuries at the most inconvenient and unfortunate of times. It did feel like we had turned a corner on this season, that we were finally approaching normalcy, that this was the regular squad, that for more than 6 minutes and 9 seconds, which was before Sunday, the amount of time that we had seen Maxey, Embiid, and Paul George on the floor together, that finally there would be some time for these guys to hash that out. Well, that has been officially taken from us, and this is another just issue thrown in the pathway of this team this year. So for the time being, we will wait for a little bit more news from the Sixers perspective with Joel, what sort of timeline they're talking about, what the severity of this is. We did get once again the update from Shams that directly said that this is a sinus fracture that was suffered last night. He will be further evaluated this weekend. So we're kind of at the nature of finding out when that is the case. But the goals for this Sixers team cannot change. That you have lost the window or the ability to take your foot off the gas and wait for Joel to get back. You got to find a way to win some games in the meantime. And frankly, when having the larger picture conversation, I think if you can start to, win games in the absence of Joel Embiid, that's something that you do need to keep in mind moving forward. And for the trade conversations, which I know we'll see in the comments here, I know you guys are rushing to throw in the trade Joel Embiid, which I hear the frustration. I totally do. But for the time being, it's legally not allowed this season, as he did sign the extension in the offseason. And for what it's worth here, the grass is not always greener, that I struggle to find a pathway to this Sixers team to actually improving by moving on from Joel Embiid. And why do I say that specifically here? Because every other NBA team sees this exact same thing that we're seeing. This guy continually on the injury list. This guy whose body seems to be failing him. The track record of centers injury outlook improving on the north side of 30 years old simply does not happen that often. So in the NBA in general, I think the player or the team that lands the best player in trade typically wins that. I don't find a world or see a world where the Sixers can potentially come out on top of that one. But that is a discussion for another day. That's something that we can bookmark and have a little bit firmer of a discussion on this offseason. And frankly, how the rest of the year plans out, I think will directly impact what the outlook is on that. But for the time being, the Sixers team has no time to rest on their heels and worry about that. They got to focus on winning games and finding a way to do it without their best player. So this season from hell continues for the Sixers team. I did think we turned the injury corner, and I guess that was pretty naive of me considering what the Sixers have thrown our ways in past year. So ultimately, I'm going to still keep rocking with you guys right here on Sixers Digest for whatever else happens this season, and I have no clue what is off the table at this point. So keep rocking with me. Appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video here and any comments you have below, and hopefully be back in a little bit higher spirits the next time that I'm on the mic here. Peace.